All right, you remember last week we started off our class with which city? Town. Bethlehem, the birthplace of Jesus. That's where we started out this geographical and cultural study. What do you remember from last week's class?
It's a know-nothing spot.
It's a know-nothing spot. It's the middle of Nowheresville, if you will. Well, today's going to be pretty much the same, even more so. What else do you remember?
The place of King David.
Okay, King David was from Bethlehem. Penned probably many of the Psalms in the fields, out with his sheep.
There's correlation between King David and Jesus.
Yes, there's a definite correlation between David and Jesus. Anybody else? What do you remember from Galilee? It did have a view. Yes, it was not obstructed by, for example, a Mount of Olives like Jerusalem. It did have a view. Okay, so Bethlehem, way down here. Okay, Jerusalem right here. We're going all the way north to Galilee. We're going to Nazareth because Jesus is not known as Jesus of Bethlehem. He is known as Jesus of Nazareth. In fact, Luke 4:16 says Jesus spent nearly 30 years there. He was brought up there, it says. It's where he was raised, not born, but raised. That was his hometown, if you will. If you have a Bible and you're in Luke chapter 2, you know, we don't know much about his youth. We know that one story where he goes to Jerusalem. And remember, if he grows up way up here in Nazareth and he's going to go to Jerusalem, he's got to come all the way through Samaria to get down to Jerusalem. It's quite a trip. But he's up in Nazareth, and that's where he grows up. Luke 2:40, the child grew and became strong. He was filled with wisdom, and the grace of God was upon him. Verse 52, and Jesus grew in wisdom and stature and in favor with God and men. And in between the two is that story, right? Well, the only story in the canonical Gospels, by the way, are you familiar with the term canon or canonical? Canon means in here. Not cannon that shoots a cannonball. Take one end out. Cannon with one end. Well, it has two ends, but one's in the middle and one's at the end. Cannon that shoots a cannonball has three ends, right? Two in the middle. Okay, this is a canon, which means library. I don't know why they call it that. They pay, people more money and they come up with different names for normal stuff. This is a canon, a library of 66 books. Well, the canonical Gospels, which means the four Gospels in this book, what are they? Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. In those Gospel accounts, the only story about Jesus' growing up years takes place not in Nazareth, where he grew up, but in Jerusalem, way down south. Okay? He was 12 years old. He's engaged in discussion with religious teachers in the temple, and he impresses everyone with his insight. Right? You remember? Jesus probably received a great education while he's down here in Jerusalem on vacation, basically. Way up here in Nazareth, that's where he received his education. That's where he learned about God. And the more you can know about his geography, the easier it is to understand some of that. He probably received quite an extensive education in Nazareth, in the law, in the Torah, the law of God. it's possible that Nazareth was populated with a lot of people who really cared about the law of God. They were more traditional, more conservative. They loved God's law. They studied it. They taught it to their children. And Jesus is a byproduct of that, not just because of that. He's also the Son of God, right? But he grew up in a place that was probably very small, very traditional, very conservative. Today, Nazareth is a large urban center in Galilee. Not back then. Today, Nazareth is the largest urban center in Galilee. It's the seat of government for Israel's northern district, the economic hub of the region. Visitors go to its downtown and they're shown structures that are supposedly in some way associated with Jesus' family. All right, it's a tourist trap. But what can you know, or at least reasonably suppose, of the character of Nazareth in the first century? That's what we're concerned with. What can we find out about Nazareth from the first century? Well, if you study the geography, if you find out what kind of archaeology has been done, as well as looking in the New Testament for hints there, you can find out quite a bit, actually. So I want to first take a broader view of Galilee itself. This whole northern section, let's consider that first before we narrow in on just Nazareth. Is there anything that you can think of that you know about Galilee? Jesus was also known as Jesus of Galilee. Not Jesus of Jerusalem. Not Jesus of Judah, or Judea, way down here. Jesus of Galilee, way up here. Nazareth, the modern city and the ancient village, is located high up on a ridge. I'm going to show you. I know you can't see it. Okay, this is a topographical map. If you can see Nazareth right here in the middle. By the way, this map is backwards. This is north. This is south. Got Jerusalem way over here. Okay, so you're just in the northern mountains looking southward down through Israel, Samaria, Judea. Okay, so this is backwards from the one we just looked at. You got Nazareth right here. You got Jerusalem way down here. You got Samaria in between. Nazareth, if you could see this, is way up at the top of a ridge, a mountain. Just like Bethlehem was. Just like Jerusalem was. Nazareth is too. And it's on a ridge that marks a line between Galilee, which is north, this way, and the Jezreel Valley. Runs right through the middle. Can you see that vacant spot? That's all valley. This is all mountain. This is all mountain. This is valley right in the middle. That's the Jezreel Valley. The Jezreel Valley is the largest of the agricultural valleys of modern and ancient Israel. Lots of farming goes on down in the valley. It's the only level connector between the Mediterranean Sea and the Transjordan. Okay, so if you're going to travel, here's the Mediterranean Sea, lots of ports, right? Lots of business. But if you're going to get from here, way over here, how are you going to do that? Where are you going to find the easiest route? If that's all mountain there, and this is all mountain here, and this is a valley, you're going to take the Jezreel Valley, right? It just makes sense. Much easier if you're on foot or on camel, or you've got maybe a donkey, or whatever the case may be. It's much easier to go on flat land than it is through the mountains, right? So Nazareth is right on the top of a ridge that overlooks the valley, and you've got all this international traffic going through the valley. That make sense? Literally, you can look down from Nazareth and see the main road that takes you through there, and all that traffic is traveling on. Now think about it. Jesus can grow up just going out to the edge of a very steep cliff, basically, and look down, and there's all these people from all over the world traveling right beneath him. Now he can also look, just over here is Mount Tabor. We talked about that recently. You've got a lot of important things in the Old Testament happen. Okay, here's Nazareth. He can look and see Mount Tabor stretching up. Mount Carmel, right here this way. He can look this way and see Mount Carmel. What happened on Mount Carmel? Showdown with Ezekiel and the altar. Okay, you've got all these things happening. And by the way, if you're big time into Revelation, Megiddo, Armageddon, so on and so forth, all right there. It's all right there. Jesus can go out just to the edge of his village and look out and see just about everything that you read about in the Old Testament is all right there within sight. If he goes out and takes his copy of his Bible, which would be our Old Testament, right? He's got the scrolls and he's looking. He can literally almost look and see and point out where things happen. As well as people from all over the world traveling right beneath him through the Jezreel Valley. It was Rome's primary gateway connecting the port of Ptolemais with Gilead. It is known in ancient writing as the Great Plain. Now, much of Galilee proper is the hilly region to the north of that valley. Okay? It's a zone that by nature lies open to international influences, and the world is passing right through there. All kinds of languages, customs, foods, peoples. You ever been to a place where the world passes through? New York City? Los Angeles? Paris? What's it like? Busy? What else?
Crowded.
Crowded. And influences, from smells of cooking to languages and tastes and all kinds of things are happening right at the foot of Nazareth. The land is divided. This is Lower Galilee. Remember, this would be the southern half of Galilee. This is Upper Galilee. Upper Galilee is 2,000 feet in elevation. Anything in Lower Galilee is less than 2,000 feet. Still mountainous, but Upper Galilee is 2,000 feet and higher. Lower Galilee is less than that, leading down into the Jezreel Valley. The heartland of Lower Galilee is Nazareth. If you are interested in it, remember when the 12 tribes split up the land and they all went to live in different areas? Zebulun and Naphtali would fall in this area of Nazareth. It's composed of hard limestone, long fertile valleys nestled in here and there. The terrain offers wonderful conditions for prosperous agricultural village life. It has rich, fertile soil. It has plentiful rainfall, abundant sources of surface water, terraced slopes for orchards. This is Josephus. You familiar with Josephus? Josephus has a tendency to exaggerate. You should know that. You'll see that here. I'm quoting from him. For the land is everywhere so rich in soil and pasturage and produces such variety of trees that even the most indolent are tempted by these facilities to devote themselves to agriculture. You can hear a little bit of exaggeration. He's saying anybody that comes here wants to move here and be a farmer. Continuing on. In fact, every inch of soil has been cultivated by the inhabitants. Probably not. Little exaggeration. Okay, but you get the point. He says there's not a parcel of wasteland. The towns, too, are thickly distributed, and even the villages, thanks to the fertility of the soil, are all so densely populated that the smallest of them contains above 15,000 inhabitants. No, sorry, Josephus, that's not right, but thank you for letting us, he gave us the picture. References to Galilee in text from the time of the New Testament are generally speaking not of a geographical area, but a political district. Herod. You ever heard of Herod? Okay, Herod is not a person. Herod is a title. There were several Herods. Herod Antipas, Herod the Great. Okay, several Herods. And wherever they ruled, Galilee was their district. So it had movable boundaries based on certain times and conditions. But this is where Jesus grew up, and this was where his ministry was. Luke 3 and verse 1 tells us it was primarily in Galilee. So here is Jesus. This is the Sea of Galilee here, and all of this is upper and lower Galilee. And that's where Jesus spends the greater part of his ministry. He does go down to Jerusalem several times, but he doesn't stay long. He just goes to visit for a little while and goes back up to Galilee. So let's laser in for a moment then on Nazareth. It sits at the very top of a mountain in a basin. You ever been flying over the mountains of, say, Montana? And at the top of those mountains you see water, like a big pond. Isn't that the craziest thing in the world? Well, picture that, if you will, with Nazareth. Though it's not a pond, it's in a little basin. At the very top of this ridge, and almost a sheer drop-off down into the Jezreel Valley, which we'll talk about when we get to it. Remember, Jesus goes home, and he speaks in the synagogue, and they get mad? And they take him to the edge of the town, and they're going to push him over the cliff? Right there. And they're pushing him down into the Jezreel Valley, where all that traffic is.
Roddy?
Yes.
I thought about that hundreds of times. What are they pushing him off of?
It is, you can Google it and get pictures. It is literally, you go and it's just like an 800-foot drop off.
I never pictured that in my mind.
Yeah.
Until this particular
Yes.
pointed it out.
That's why these maps help so much. If you get a picture of the geography in your mind, and they're making a statement. You don't belong to us. You've gone worldly. Remember, these are small town, traditional, conservative, and they're saying, you're reading the text like a liberal. We're going to give you to them. And they're pushing him off that cliff down into where all the international traffic is. To the north, the Nazareth Ridge slopes a bit more gradually into the Beth Netophah Valley. Okay, that's the opposite side. This is the Jezreel Valley, and over here is the Beth Netophah Valley. And there are some other towns that you've heard of, such as Cana of Galilee. What happened in Cana? Jesus' first miracle that's on record anyway. He goes to the wedding, he turns water into wine. That was just right there. The largest city at the time was Sepphoris. It's not mentioned in the scriptures. It's just right there beside Nazareth. It's the largest city. It's never mentioned in scripture. Jesus probably spent time there. I say probably because we don't know it. It's not written there, but there was, well, I'll get to it momentarily. He's just in a place, and think about, he wants to get the message of salvation to all people and spread throughout the world. He's in a place where people are traveling throughout all parts of the world within just a few steps of him all the time. That is the internet. That is TV, radio, whatever.
Does he actually speak with all those people that are going?
He is out speaking and large crowds follow. You know, it says multitudes show up. Well, where do we think all those people came from? Well, some from towns and villages around, but there was international traffic all the time. It's like a major highway. These people are stopping off. Hey, look, there's 100 people gathered over there. What do you think they're going to do? They're going to go see what's happening. They've just been on a ship for who knows how long. Or they're about to get on one, and they're interested in what's going on. Sepphoris. Josephus speaks of it a lot. It's not mentioned in the Gospels. It's the largest city, and it's just a few miles, 4 or 5 miles from Nazareth. Would take you about 2 hours to walk it. But Nazareth is at the top of a high rocky ridge. It does not have much of a view because it's in a little basin. Okay? That tended to discourage or disengage the residents of Nazareth from any opportunities anywhere else. They were kind of at the top and then down in a little basin, out of sight, out of mind. That's the way they liked it. It's a very backwards little small town. Nobody has reason to go there. Nothing is offered there. They don't have enough agriculture to offer the world. They have barely enough to survive themselves. There are no natural resources that the world wants there. There's nothing there except this group of people that are kind of backwards. And I say that because what does Nathaniel say? Nazareth. Can anything good come from Nazareth? It has a sort of a poor reputation, a small, backwards little place. It's a dead end, literally. You're not going to travel through there because of that steep ridge. It's not a shortcut. You're not going to hit the highway any faster going through there. So Nazareth is kind of a one-way street. There's no reason to go to Nazareth. So nobody does. That makes it all the more humble, if you will. He was born in Bethlehem, a similar place. Nobody really needs to go there. But Nazareth is even more so. If you're down in Jerusalem, way down there, that's where all the Jewish traditions, worship, everything takes place, right? At least you're down by Jerusalem if you're down there. But up here in Galilee, you're far away, separated by the Samaritans. You're almost second-class citizens, rednecks. And if you're from Nazareth, it's the lowliest of all.
You wonder why that's where God goes.
To me, it just says, it doesn't matter where you come from. It's a very humble, lowly place. And it shows he is not holier than thou, higher than we are. He's one of us. That was as human a place as you could get. And that's where he grows up. I didn't say that.
Rednecks are good people.
Yes. Because it's limestone, the soil is very fertile. When there was ample rainfall, and there usually was, you have great agriculture. But because of the limited space, you don't have big barns. that talk about that. Why do you need to tear down your barns and build more space? Remember? He would understand the different types of soil. It was rocky, and there were very closed-in spaces, so you had to walk around them, and hard-pan path on the edges, and then the fertile soil in the middle. He would understand all of that. And so would many of the people listening to him of the day. Well, if you look at archaeology, not a lot of archaeology has been done on Nazareth. Because the bedrock is too shallow, so nothing gets buried. All right? They don't have to dig down. The bedrock is right there. And secondly, they have just built on top and on top and on top for years, so you can't study what's on bottom. So not a lot of archaeology has been done. When you look at the text, what they call textual evidence, you start looking for Nazareth in old writings. Not to be found. The only place it's found is in the Bible. Until 3rd or 4th century. Which also tells you it's a nowhere place, nowheresville. They have no reason to even write about it. Or it was brand new. A brand new village about the time of Jesus, or shortly before. Could be either or. We just don't know. More likely, it was just nothing to write about. You don't find any writing until late 3rd or early 4th century. There's a fragment of a piece of marble in a synagogue in Caesarea. Caesarea being right here on the edge of the Sea of Galilee. Caesarea had a marble from a piece of marble slab from a synagogue, and it was quoting 1 Chronicles 24, which was where a listing of priests, and Nazareth is mentioned. After AD 70, the destruction of the temple, the priests have to go somewhere. They all separate, and one group goes to Nazareth. How about neighboring towns and places? Can they tell us anything? Oh, they tell us a lot. I've mentioned Sepphoris. Sepphoris has large-scale excavations. There are lots of archaeology going on there. And what they have found, it was a busy, bustling city. It was the political headquarters for the Roman period in Galilee. So there was a lot going on. There's the politics, the soldiers, the presence of Herod. Everything is in Sepphoris, and that's just 4 or 5 miles from Nazareth. 4 miles apart. Less than a 2-hour walk.
Was that where Herod, was that where his home was? Or was that
That's where, when he was in Galilee, yes. He was represented in Sepphoris. Now, there were several palaces that he lived in. But Sepphoris would have one. Absolutely.
That makes what you're saying about that village is that I believe that no doubt Jesus had been there.
Oh, sure.
Most likely talked, but I remember where he told his disciples, if the town does not receive you, shake the dust off your feet.
Yes.
That could be the scenario that they were under.
Absolutely. Now, there's another reason Jesus would have been there. What was Joseph by trade?
Carpenter.
All translations say carpenter. We talked about this. Somebody, was it you and I talked about it? No, it was Lynn. The word is tecton. Matthew 13:55 says Joseph, it doesn't say this, but Joseph, the father of Jesus, was a tecton, a carpenter. I looked that up, and tecton simply means a skilled worker in local building materials, whether it's wood or stone. So he would be a carpenter, a stonemason, he just builds things with the available materials. Jesus was also a tecton. Just build whatever available tools and materials you had, you could use them. You were skilled in building things with them, not just wood. Okay? And in Nowheresville, Nazareth, you're not building a whole lot. So where would you go? The city that's growing the fastest? The city that needs lots of builders? I'm sure he went to Sepphoris. Spent a lot of time there, but it's never mentioned in Scriptures. So that's about all we'll mention of that one. However, there is another, which is Cana of Galilee. Now that one he went to. And the weight of church tradition locates Cana at Kafr Kana. Kafrkana. If you go visit today, and on most maps it shows, this one doesn't have Cana, I think I'm behind a few maps. Okay. Cana right here, Sepphoris here, Nazareth here. All right, so and they look far apart on that map, but you have to, that's zoomed in. You're talking 4 or 5 miles. That's it.
So is the one below Nazareth over the mountain?
Cana?
Cana looks like it's north.
Cana is north.
And the other one that you mentioned, is it south over the mountain, over the ridge?
Sepphoris is due north. Cana is a little bit farther, but the tradition says that's the Cana. Archaeology says that's not the Cana. But because this is a bustling tourist place, that's where you get on a bus, they're going to take you and say this is where Jesus came for the wedding and turned water into wine. But archaeology says that's not it. But the place that is it is about 3 or 4 miles from the nearest paved road. Way out in the middle of nowhere. And so they don't want to switch. You know how marketers are.
I got a question.
Okay?
Present day, Israel is Holy Land. It's my understanding that when a town or a city or whatever has a mount in front of it, that means that it was built on top of. Is that correct?
It means it's built on the top of a mountain, yes.
Not the same location as the town with a new one?
Sometimes. They do move, but not all of them move. You know, they shift maybe just a little bit in one direction or another, but not in this case. Not in the case of Cana. There are multiple places that have a similar name of Cana, one way or another. It's spelled just slightly different, one letter off. It was a very, very popular name. Archaeology suggests the Cana where Jesus would have traveled to, which had a large Jewish synagogue with ritual pools, known today as baptistries, was located at this Kakana, it's called, okay? What makes that probably make sense, there were large jars of water. We think that water was for drinking. That water most likely was for ritualistic cleansing. And so they think, putting 2 and 2 together, more likely where this large Jewish synagogue is where the Cana that Jesus went to. But it's not really all that important. We're just trying to learn something from the geography. The biggest point I want you to see is Nazareth, if it weren't for the Bible, probably wouldn't even be on the map today. If it weren't for Jesus being born there. Being raised there. It was a small village, probably 100 people or less, is what they tell us. It may have gotten up to a few hundred at times, but it was a very small, nowheresville place. Does that tell you anything about Jesus and his upbringing?
I've got a question, it's off.
Okay.
From Bethlehem to get to Nazareth, would you go down to the sea and then up?
If you were in a big hurry and you absolutely had to, you would go right straight through Samaria. But if it were just normal travels, you would go over to the Jordan River and up.
Straight up the shore, it's like it's
Yeah, it is. Samaria is very mountainous. And remember the Samaritan woman saying, you taught that you meet in Jerusalem and we meet on this mountain, you meet on that mountain, we meet on this mountain. It was very mountainous. Mount Gerizim, that's on one of these.
With all those mountains, you wonder how they dug a well.
Yeah, exactly right.
Gerizim is just south of Samaria.
It looks like
Here it
it's
is.
right in between.
Mount Gerizim is right here, right near Sychar, Samaria.
When you think, all of his upbringing and then his early ministry, we find that he was trying not to be obvious. His ministry didn't start until 30 years old. So everything was in a state of seclusion. Being Bethlehem, being Nazareth, it couldn't have been a better place for that seclusion. Does that make sense?
It's almost like he's hiding out.
Exactly.
Doesn't want the world to know just yet.
And anything that had transpired, or it just didn't get out. It wasn't like it.
Yeah. Which really gives doubt, in my mind, to those folks that write, oh, he turned stones into doves, and, as a kid, he performed all these miracles as a child. That doesn't seem to fit with this. It's like he's trying to stay secretive at the moment. Now, the time will come when he wants the word to get out. In fact, in Cana, remember what he told his mom? My time has not yet come. It's not time for me to do this yet. Like she's kicking the bird out of the nest, the baby bird out of the nest. Time to fly.
We have an early reading where it's talking about that he grew in stature.
Yes.
So as a human being, there was that aspect of Jesus. Holy Spirit gave him information, instruction, and he grew in that aspect of it. But he grew as a human being. And there comes a time as a human being before you actually are ready to go and do whatever your vocation happens to be.
And remember, he was human enough that his own village, Nazareth, rejected him. Right? You're not the Son of God. You're not the Messiah. They thought he was crazy.
If he'd been doing all miracles in Nazareth all those years,
They would have known.
They would have been different.
Yeah.
So I don't think it was reality.
Yes. Well, next week we're going to go into the wilderness. Learn about ministry in the wilderness. Probably talking about wilderness being right down here near Jericho, between Jericho and the Jordan River. Again, what was their wilderness? Desert, hills, rough country, caves.
Does wilderness always mean desert?
Not always. It just means unpopulated place, desolated place.
Where was the wilderness that Jesus went to after he was baptized?
We don't know exactly, but it's going to be right. We know he gets baptized in the Jordan, right? And he's close to where John the Baptist is preaching, because John the Baptist, and that's what we're talking about next week. It's probably, you can't go up into Samaria, because John wouldn't have done that. Probably in this area right here. Okay, so Qumran is pretty close. Jericho it looks far away, it's really close. But there's wilderness all out in there. And that's where we'll be. We were here, and we went up here, and now we're coming back down here next week. That's why it's good to get to know that map. But that's kind of the way the story, we're trying to go through this as chronologically as we can with the stories. Any final thoughts?